I once heard about this guy that took acid, and everything was going fine until he started to have a bad trip. He went to the top of a building and he jumped off because he thought that he could fly away. The chemical in LSD and psilocybin lives in your brain forever, and if you crack your back just right, you can have flashbacks and start hallucinating again. Taking Molly will literally melt your brain. If you take LSD more than 7 times, you'll be declared clinically insane. These are just a few of the crazy things that I've heard in my life surrounding the use of hallucinogenic drugs. But the craziest thing I've ever heard is that hallucinogens have no medical application at all. The DEA schedules hallucinogens as a Schedule 1 drug, which is the highest schedule of a drug and is said to have no medical application. I want to take this opportunity today to speak with you about why hallucinogens are scheduled improperly by the federal government, specifically LSD, psilocybin, and MDMA. And they actually do have a lot of medical benefits that people could benefit from with legalization. I grew up just outside of Portland, Oregon, so I developed a more open-minded view of certain drugs, and I've seen firsthand the benefits that some of them offer. Today, I'm going to discuss with you those personal and medical uses of hallucinogens, the ways that they've been proven to work, and a route to legalization. By the end of my speech, you will be more informed and hopefully change some of the negative views that you once held around hallucinogenic drugs. After all, you might know somebody, or you yourself could benefit from these drugs. There's no one on earth that has no issues at all. And we all deserve the right to pursue improvement from those issues. One of those issues is mental health. 1 in 5 US adults suffers from a mental illness, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. With numbers like these, chances are you probably know somebody that suffers from a mental illness. Me, myself, I personally know friends and family that suffer from bipolar disorder. One of them is my aunt, and I've seen firsthand her spend 20 hours a day in bed and only get up to get a meal or use the restroom. So it takes a toll on not only her, but the people that love her the most. Or even worse, when the dosage is incorrect of her medicine, and while the doctors are trying to figure it out, she's getting sicker, or sometimes even contemplating suicide. And unfortunately, this is the reality for many Americans every day. It's a well-known fact that smoking is bad for you. And if you talk to a smoker, they'll tell you that it's very hard to quit. And if you talk to an addict or someone in recovery, they'll tell you that it's a struggle to keep clean and sober every day. 14% of US adults smoke, according to the CDC, and 10% struggle with some sort of substance abuse, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. So this is a real issue, and it causes real health issues. And sometimes people end up dying from them. You can go to rehab, you can do counseling, nicotine patches, you can just have discipline. And these are all options, and they work for some people, but they don't work for everybody. If they did, we'd have a lot less people suffering from these issues. Which brings me to personal issues. Everybody has them, some bigger than others. One very common issue is marital issues. Couples, they can go to counseling, and sometimes they do when they can't connect with their partner. But when that doesn't work, a lot of times it ends in divorce. But there is an alternative to help you connect with your partner before you throw in the towel. I want you to imagine for a second that you are terminally ill, awaiting your imminent death. It's probably something that you would think about every day, probably all day long. Now I want you to imagine that the government tells you that you can't take a drug that would potentially help you come to acceptance with your end of life and your spirituality. There is a famous quote that says that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I can't think of a better explanation for what people are doing right now to solve their issues. But the fact of the matter is there is a real alternative, and ignoring that alternative is selfish, and people will continue to suffer, and it may even cost some people their lives. I realize that treating everybody with psychedelics is not a solution, and it is ridiculous. But everyone is different, and what works for some people might not work for another person. With that said, LSD, MDMA, and psilocybin should be made federally illegal for medical and spiritual uses. It would be regulated much like marijuana is regulated in the states where that's legal, as in you would go to the doctor, you would get a prescription, and you would pick it up at your local pharmacy or a licensed distributor. If you are seeking spiritual enlightenment, you would go to a leader in your faith. Your faith leader would get with a doctor, and your doctor would prescribe it to you, and you would go pick it up at the pharmacy. Of course, all these people would have to have specialized courses and credentials before that could happen. But by safely regulating these drugs, we can ensure that the people that need it the most, they're actually getting the help that they need. There have been numerous studies, and they have concluded with a lot of success with the use of psilocybin and the issues that I've discussed previously. One was a study at Columbia University by Mark Hager, a psychiatrist, and he found that there were only 3 documented cases of LSD overdose, none of which died. One in particular was a woman that took 550 times the recreational dosage of LSD, and not only did she not die, but she reported lower pain, and she subsequently quit her morphine addiction. With the terminally ill, there was a study by End of Life Washington, a organization that specializes in end-of-life care, and they did a study about psilocybin and the benefits with the terminally ill, and they concluded that there was an increase in optimism, acceptance, life meaning, and it actually curbed suicidal ideation in those participants. Now, with MDMA, it's not used in any form now, but it was used in the 70s and 80s for marriage counseling by therapists to a lot of success. And the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Drugs is actually bringing it back with, or they're making progress to bring it back with, according to the Trauma Research Foundation. And there was one more study about bipolar and the effects with psilocybin conducted by Ashley Heath, a Purdue University student, out at she was doing her dissertation for her PhD, and she concluded significant improvement in major depression and depression-resistant and treatment-resistant depression after a one-time large dose of psilocybin. So it's clear that these things work, and researchers, this isn't new to them, they've been studying it for decades, and it's finally getting the attention that it deserves. Although not legal now, it could be made federally legal, and the people that need it the most could finally start getting the help that they need. So if legalized, my loved ones, some of your loved ones, they could get relief from their illness. Addicts could live healthier lives. The terminally ill could come to peace, and couples could finally connect. With marijuana becoming legal in many states, I know that people could open up their minds to psychedelics as well, and we could all live in a healthier and happier America. So I want you to take what I've shared today, and if you learned something new, share it with somebody and get the discussion started about legalization and the benefits of these drugs. And if you see a ballot with a measure on it to legalize or even decriminalize psychedelics in your area, think about my speech before you write it off. So change starts at an individual level. As I bring this speech to a close, I want everyone to remember that not all drugs are bad. It's simply how you use them. There's many types of drugs that people use, and psychedelics are just another drug that could be used to help people out. It won't work for everyone and everything, but it will work for some people, and those people deserve the opportunity. So today we talked about the use of hallucinogens in mental health, addiction treatment, marital counseling, terminal illness, the ways that it's been proven to work, and a way to safely regulate. So ask yourselves, do you want to be a part of the solution and a more progressive tomorrow? And next time you hear those crazy stories about hallucinogens, just remember, you can't always believe what you hear. Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
What's that?
So if you talk kind of fast, so but you had very good points, and your information seemed to be solid. Like you've done some good research on it. Have you ever experienced anybody that, let's say, with bipolar that has tried a hallucinogen and had a positive effect, or one of these areas that you are describing? Have you ever, I know it's not legal obviously at this point, but do you know anybody that's personally tried one of these hallucinogens under these circumstances that had a positive effect?
I don't know anybody with bipolar that's specifically taken any hallucinogens and like for a medical purpose that I know of anyway. But I do have a friend that she suffers from severe PTSD, and she microdoses psilocybin, as in she takes a small amount of psilocybin every day, and it gives her the mental effects of it, but not it's not the full effect of it. And she has said that it has completely changed her life. And like she has been going through like 2 years of counseling after being diagnosed with PTSD with no help at all. And she's finally started taking psilocybin, and you can just see the difference. Like it's night and day between her and her mental health. And that's an anecdotal experience that I've had, but all the other research it's just from research that I've had, like as far as bipolar.
Right. Well, the research seems real solid, and it's encouraging to hear that you actually know of a case where the research is being backed up by a physical life happening circumstance. So thank you for the information. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
And I have a question for you, Taylor.
Okay.
I was wondering, with the research and the possibility like marijuana, this drugs being legitimized or not criminalized, what about those people that still take advantage of the legalization of these drugs? And how would a person be able to prove that these drugs make them be better?
Well, like before you take a drug, with that, I would say, I mean, you never know how you're going to react to a drug, if it's going to help you or if it's not going to help you. In the case of, and that's why you would have a doctor to help, mitigate that circumstances of somebody abusing a psychedelic. But with the case of LSD and psilocybin, it's actually very difficult to abuse because your body builds up such a tolerance so fast to it. It's a hard drug to become dependent on. It's not really considered a physically dependent drug. That, and if you take a large dose, your effects can last anywhere from 8 to 12 hours or more. So it's not something that somebody wants to do on a regular basis. With MDMA, since it's an amphetamine, it is more likely to become abused just because of the properties of the drug. And with that, it would be something that you could only get from the doctor. You go to your doctor and get that, and they would kind of mitigate it by, it's not going to be the level of the street drugs. You would get a therapeutic dosage. And yeah, I mean, there's going to be people that abuse the system, but I think it's worth it for people that actually need help and them getting their hands on the drugs that could potentially save their lives.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful. Your presentation was wonderful. And if we see it on the ballot and we got our pins out, we will think about this before we toss it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.